I am Benjamin, 35 years old, an entrepreneur often labeled as successful. I own a tech company worth millions of dollars, a sprawling suburban mansion, and a wife I once believed was my entire world, Emily. But now, sitting in my dimly lit office, I can't stop wondering, is everything I've built slowly crumbling? It all started a few months ago. I'm not one to complain, but my body has been betraying me lately. Intense headaches, bouts of dizziness so severe I had to grip the wall to stay upright, and inexplicable nausea. I visited renowned hospitals, from internists to neurologists. They shook their heads, offering vague diagnoses like work-related stress or anxiety disorder. But deep down, I know something is terribly wrong. Emily, my wife, was always by my side whenever I collapsed. She held my hand, her sparkling blue eyes brimming with tears, whispering gentle words. "You need to rest, Ben. I'm so worried about you." I used to feel warmed by her care, but now, every time she speaks, a chill runs down my spine. Am I imagining things? Or is there something insincere hidden behind her tender gaze? Things grew stranger when I started noticing the meals. Emily has always prepared them. She loves cooking, taking pride in her elaborate dishes. But lately, every time I ate, the headaches would strike, sometimes accompanied by a burning sensation in my throat. I tried to dismiss the thought, telling myself I was being paranoid. But one evening, when I accidentally spilled the bowl of soup Emily brought me, I saw her panic. Not the usual kind of worry, but a trembling look in her eyes, as if she was terrified I'd discover something. I began paying closer attention. The brief phone calls Emily took when she thought I wasn't listening. The times she left the house to go shopping but returned empty-handed. And then I noticed Daniel, my younger brother. Daniel, whom I once considered my best friend, the one I supported since he was a kid. He started visiting our house frequently when I was away on business. At first, I thought it was just brotherly affection. But then a neighbor casually mentioned, "Daniel's been coming over a lot, Ben. Funny thing, it's always when you're not home." My heart tightened. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to come together. One day, I pretended to leave for work early but returned home after a few hours. I saw Daniel's car parked out front. Emily's laughter echoed from the living room, so sweet it sent shivers down my spine. I didn't go inside. I just stood outside, my heart pounding. What were they talking about? Why were they being so secretive? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office staring at the wedding photo of Emily and me hanging on the wall. Her radiant smile now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I asked myself, "Emily, what are you hiding? And Daniel, my brother, are you really the person I trusted?" I decided not to make a scene just yet. If they were playing some game behind my back, I'd find out. I'm not someone who's easily defeated. But deep inside, I couldn't deny the pain. The pain of someone who thought he had it all, now facing the risk of losing everything, even his life. Suspicion was like a small flame smoldering in my heart. It wasn't large, but hot enough to keep me restless. I began watching Emily and Daniel more closely, like a hunter stalking prey. Every action, every word they said, I noted in my mind. I didn't want to believe that the wife I loved and the brother I treated like family could betray me. But the truth sometimes is crueler than fear itself. One evening, when Emily thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering on the phone. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, my heart pounding. Her voice was soft, but clear enough for me to catch every word. "Just a few more weeks, Daniel. It'll be done. He won't suspect a thing." I stood there, frozen, as if the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. They were talking about me. I was certain. The next day, I pretended to leave for a business trip. I told Emily I'd be staying in the next city over for 2 days. She smiled, hugged me, and told me to take care of myself. But her eyes, though she tried to hide it, betrayed a flicker of satisfaction. I drove off, but only circled a few blocks before parking a few hundred meters from the house. I sat in the car, staring at our brightly lit home, feeling like a stranger spying on my own life. Less than an hour later, Daniel's car pulled up. He walked into my house as if it were his own, I gripped the steering wheel, struggling to contain the rage surging in my chest. I wanted to barge in, punch Daniel in the face, and confront Emily, but no, I needed proof. If they were playing a dirty game, I'd make them pay. I waited until late at night when Daniel left. I slipped into the house through the back door, moving as silently as a shadow. Emily was asleep, or pretending to be. I went to my office and checked the hidden camera I'd installed a few days earlier. I'm not proud of it, spying on my own wife, but I had no choice. The footage appeared on the screen and my heart seemed to stop. Emily and Daniel were sitting on the sofa, closer than normal. They spoke in hushed, calculating tones. Daniel said, "Just one more dose, Em. He won't survive it. The doctors will think it's heart failure. No one will suspect a thing." Emily nodded, her eyes cold. "We need to hurry, Daniel. I don't want to drag this out. Once it's done, we'll have everything." I turned off the video, my hands trembling. They weren't just having an affair, they wanted to kill me. They wanted to take my life, to seize my money, my company, everything I'd worked so hard to build. The pain tore through my chest, but I refused to break. I copied the video onto a USB drive and locked it in the safe. It was my first piece of evidence, but I needed more. I hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Carl. I gave him all the details about Emily and Daniel and asked him to track their every move. Carl didn't ask questions, he just nodded and said, "I'll get you the truth, Mr. Benjamin." Every day he sent reports, their secret meetings, their brief phone calls, even their visits to a chemical store on the outskirts of town. Reading them, my heart grew colder. They'd been planning this for a long time, step by step, like predators stalking their prey. But I didn't just sit and wait. I changed my habits. I stopped eating the food Emily prepared, claiming my stomach was sensitive. I pretended to be more tired and frail than usual, letting them think their plan was working. Every time Emily looked at me with her concerned eyes, I smirked inwardly. "Keep acting, Emily. You'll see. I know the confrontation is coming soon. They can't wait much longer, and neither can I." 2 weeks later, Daniel invited Emily and me to a party at his house. This was undoubtedly the stage where not only he but also I would play our trump cards. Beforehand, I had called Carl, the private investigator, to discuss the plan. He warned me to be extremely cautious. If I let my guard down, my life could be in serious danger. Before leaving the house, the atmosphere between Emily and me was heavy as lead. She stood in front of the mirror, applying red lipstick, her black silk dress clinging to her body. "Are you okay, Ben?" "You look exhausted," she said, her voice sweet but her eyes scanning me as if probing. I nodded, faking a cough to make her think I was still weak and easily manipulated. "I'm fine. Let's just enjoy tonight," I replied with a faint smile. In my mind, I double-checked the small recording device hidden in my jacket pocket and the hand sanitizer bottle, my cover for the move I was about to make. Emily didn't know, but I had been ready for a long time. In the car, she was silent, occasionally glancing at me. I drove, pretending to focus on the road, but my heart was pounding. Carl had warned me. "They'll make their move tonight, Benjamin. Watch the drinks." I knew Emily wouldn't let this opportunity slip. She had waited too long, and so had I. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, telling myself, "Stay calm. One wrong move and it's all over." When we arrived, Daniel greeted us at the door, his smile bright but his eyes sharp and cold. "Ben, Emily, thanks for coming," he said, hugging me like a close brother. I patted his shoulder, suppressing my anger. "Quite a party, Daniel," I replied, my voice casual. Emily let go of my arm, mingling with the crowd, but I caught her exchanging a glance with Daniel. A fleeting look, but enough to confirm my suspicions. They had a plan. The party kicked off lively. Music blared, lights twinkled, and glasses of red wine shimmered in the guests' hands. Emily, as always, shone in the crowd. She laughed and chatted, but I could see the tension in how tightly she gripped her glass. Then she approached the bar, personally pouring a glass of red wine. "For you, Ben. Your favorite," she said, handing it to me, her eyes glinting with calculation. I took the glass and sniffed it lightly. A faint, strange odor. Subtle, but enough for me to know this wasn't just wine. My heart raced, but I kept my smile. "Thanks, darling," I said, raising the glass as if to drink. Then I glanced at Daniel, standing a few steps away, chatting with some guests. I walked over, feigning enthusiasm. "Hey, Daniel, come here," I called, throwing an arm around him like a brother. In that moment, when no one was watching, I deftly tilted my glass, pouring some of the wine from mine into his. The move was quick, discreet, masked by the hug and my laughter. I raised my glass, turning to the crowd. "Everyone, a toast to Daniel. Thank you, my little brother, for throwing this amazing party," I shouted, my voice full of excitement. The crowd cheered, glasses clinking in a lively chorus. Daniel smiled, raised his glass, and took a large gulp. I brought the glass to my lips but didn't let a single drop touch my tongue. I stood there, watching, waiting. Seconds later, Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. He clutched his chest, eyes wide in shock, his body convulsing. Emily's scream tore through the air. "Daniel! No!" The crowd erupted into chaos like a swarm of startled bees. I stood still, coldly watching Emily. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with horror. In my jacket pocket, the recording device was still running. I dialed 911, speaking clearly. "I suspect a poisoning at this location. Send police and an ambulance immediately." Then I looked at Emily, her eyes burning as if to incinerate me. But I only gave her a faint smile. "The game is over, Emily." Chaos exploded like a bomb. Screams, running footsteps, and the wail of ambulance sirens pierced the night. Daniel lay on the floor, convulsing, his eyes glazed, while the panicked guests shoved around him. Emily knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she held him, screaming, "Daniel, wake up, please!" But when her eyes met mine, I saw it. Not just pain, but the panic of someone whose plan had been exposed. I stood there in the brightly lit room, maintaining a calm facade, though a storm raged inside me. Guests whispered, some tried to help Daniel, others stood frozen in horror. Emily jumped up, intending to follow the ambulance, but I grabbed her wrist tightly, my voice low and sharp as a blade. "You're staying here, Emily, we need to talk." She flinched, her eyes flickering as if she wanted to flee, but the crowd was watching, and I gave her no chance to escape. "Ben, let go. Daniel needs me," she screamed, struggling, but I tightened my grip, my gaze icy. "Daniel will be taken care of. You, on the other hand, have some explaining to do." My voice carried, loud enough for those nearby to turn, curious. The tension in the air was palpable, like a taut string about to snap. In my pocket, the recording device kept running, and I knew it was time to play my hand. Suddenly, Emily stopped struggling. She looked at me, then at the crowd, and as if unable to bear the pressure, she shouted, "That wasn't your glass, Ben. Why was it Daniel?" Her words, ringing out in the now deathly silent room, were as clear a confession as any. The guests around us froze, some covering their mouths, whispering. I released her wrist and stepped back, letting all eyes fall on Emily. "What did you just say, Emily?" I asked, my voice slow, emphasizing each word. She clutched her face, trembling, but couldn't take back her words. No, you misunderstood," she stammered, but her panicked eyes betrayed her. The crowd began to murmur, the whispers spreading like wildfire. I stood there, watching the wife I once loved dig her own grave. The police arrived shortly after, 3 officers stepping in, their stern uniforms cutting through the chaotic atmosphere. I calmly approached them, handing over the USB containing the home security footage, the messages between Emily and Daniel collected by Carl, and the recording of her reaction at the party. "I suspect my wife and brother conspired to poison me," I said, my voice steady. "All the evidence is here." One officer opened a laptop, playing the video in front of the crowd. The footage of Emily and Daniel whispering about the final dose appeared clear and undeniable. The guests' whispers turned to gasps of shock. Emily stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with despair. She tried to deny it. "No, that's not what I meant." But when an officer read aloud a message from her phone, "Just tonight, Daniel, and he's done," she collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The truth was laid bare right in front of those who once saw Emily as the perfect wife. I looked at her, no longer feeling pain, only a cold resolve. "You've lost, Emily." The police handcuffed Emily right there amidst the horrified gazes of the guests. She didn't resist, only lowered her head, her disheveled hair obscuring the face that once shone brightly. The clink of the handcuffs echoed like the final notes of a closing symphony. I stood there watching the woman I once loved being led out of the room, not once looking back. Daniel, now in the emergency room, was also under tight surveillance after surviving the critical moment. I knew neither of them could escape. They were detained, awaiting trial. I worked with the police, providing every piece of evidence. The toxicology report from Daniel's blood matching the symptoms I experienced during my hospital visits, along with the recordings, videos, and detailed reports from Carl. Each piece of evidence was like a brick in the wall of justice, trapping Emily and Daniel in their crimes. In the weeks that followed, I prepared for the trial. I didn't want emotions to sway me, but every night, sitting in a house now far too large, I couldn't help but recall the old days, when Emily still smiled by my side, when Daniel was the little brother I protected. The pain lingered, but I refused to let it drag me down. I had to be strong, not for them, but for myself. Further police investigation revealed that Emily and Daniel had purchased the poison from an illegal source, meticulously planning for months to weaken me before delivering a fatal dose at the party. They calculated that my death would be ruled as heart failure, with no one suspecting foul play. But they never anticipated that I had grown suspicious long ago, prepared myself, and ultimately outplayed them at their own game. On the day Emily was taken to the station, I wasn't there. I didn't need to witness that scene to feel victorious. Daniel, after recovering, was also arrested. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, and scheming to seize assets. Each charge was like a hammer blow to their fate. All I had to do was wait for the trial, where the truth would be fully exposed and justice would be served. When the trial day arrived, I entered the courtroom with an odd feeling. Not quite triumph, nor entirely pain, but a sense of emptiness. I had waited for this moment, but it didn't bring the joy I once imagined. The vast courtroom, with its polished wooden benches and heavy atmosphere, seemed to weigh down on everyone present. I sat in the front row, my gaze fixed forward where Emily and Daniel would soon appear. They who were once my entire world were now just two faded shadows in a prolonged nightmare. The door opened and Emily entered first, her handcuffs glinting under the lights. She had lost weight, her once proud golden hair now tangled, hiding her red, swollen eyes. She didn't look at me, only lowered her head, walking slowly to the defendant's seat. Daniel followed, his appearance haggard, his eyes sunken like those of a broken man. He glanced at me briefly, but the confidence of old was gone, replaced by despair. I didn't respond, just sat upright, my hands gripping the edge of the seat, waiting for justice to begin. The judge, a middle-aged man with a deep, sharp voice, banged his gavel. The trial commenced. The prosecutor, Ms. Linda Harper, stood, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Today, we are here to try Emily Carter and Daniel Carter for grave offenses: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, and scheming to seize assets. These acts are not only violations of the law, but also a profound betrayal of trust and familial bonds." I listened to every word, feeling them carve into my heart, reminding me of what I had lost. Ms. Harper presented the case with terrifying precision. She recounted how Emily and Daniel planned for months, purchasing poison from an illegal source and gradually weakening me through meals and drinks. She displayed their text messages on a large screen, chilling words like, "Just one more dose and he won't survive," or, "Once it's done, the company will be ours." The courtroom buzzed with whispers, some shaking their heads in disbelief. I sat there watching the evidence I had gathered through Carl come to light, each piece fitting perfectly into the puzzle of their crime. Then came the video from my home security camera. The footage of Emily and Daniel on the sofa, whispering about the final dose, silenced the room. Emily's voice, though soft, rang clear. "We need to hurry, Daniel. I don't want to drag this out." I saw some in the room turn away, unable to bear it. Emily hunched over, her shoulders trembling, while Daniel sat motionless, as if resigned to his fate. The prosecutor called me to the witness stand. I walked forward, feeling every eye on me. I swore to tell the truth and began recounting everything. From the mysterious headaches and unexplained hospitalizations to the moment I grew suspicious and started investigating. I spoke of the video of Carl and of the fateful party where I swapped the wine to protect myself. My voice was steady, but each sentence felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I didn't look at Emily or Daniel, only at the judge, as if telling someone else's story. "Mr. Benjamin, why didn't you go to the police as soon as you suspected something?" Ms. Harper asked, her eyes piercing. "I needed proof," I replied, my voice low. I didn't want to believe my wife and brother could do this, but when the truth became undeniable, I knew I had to act. The defense attorney for Emily and Daniel, Mr. Richard Kane, tried to counter. He argued that I might have misunderstood, that my symptoms could have been due to a medical condition, not poisoning. He even suggested I fabricated the story to retaliate against Emily for suspected infidelity. But his arguments crumbled when the prosecutor presented the toxicology report from Daniel's blood matching my earlier hospital visits. A medical expert was called, confirming that the poison used could cause heart failure if accumulated over time, and the dose at the party was lethal enough to kill instantly. Emily was called to the stand. She trembled, her voice breaking as she tried to deny the charges. "I didn't want to kill Ben," she said, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted him to rest, to hand the company to Daniel. I didn't know the substance was that dangerous." But when the prosecutor played the recording from the party, her voice screaming, "That wasn't your glass, Ben," Emily collapsed, unable to speak further. The courtroom buzzed and I saw the judge's expression darken. Daniel, in contrast, chose silence. He didn't deny the charges or offer excuses, only lowered his head when questioned by his lawyer. Perhaps he knew that with the mountain of evidence before him, words were futile. I looked at him, searching for the image of the little brother who used to chase me to play ball. But that image had long vanished. The trial lasted 3 days, but to me each hour felt like a year. I listened to every detail again, from how Emily laced my food with poison to the times Daniel feigned concern as I collapsed. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, not just to them but to my heart. I had loved them, trusted them, and now I had to watch them pay the price. The final day of sentencing arrived. The judge stood, his voice ringing out, stern but devoid of emotion. "Emily Carter, you are found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, and scheming to seize assets. You are sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Emily burst into tears, covering her face, but no one in the room showed sympathy. "Daniel Carter," the judge continued, "you are found guilty of the same charges with a sentence of 22 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years due to your secondary role in the scheme." The gavel struck, ending it all. Emily and Daniel were handcuffed and led out of the room. Emily turned back, her pleading eyes meeting mine, but I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching them being taken away, their figures fading behind the door. Justice had been served, but there was no joy in my heart, only an unfillable void. I left the courtroom, stepping outside into blinding sunlight that couldn't warm me. I knew a long road lay ahead. I had lost my family, my trust, but I still had myself, and I wouldn't let this pain define my life. The trial ended, but my life didn't stop. I left the courtroom, stepping into the blinding sunlight that couldn't dispel the chill in my heart. The house that was once a warm home was now an empty shell, filled with memories I no longer wanted to keep. Emily and Daniel were behind bars, but the pain they left behind still smoldered like a scar that would never fully heal. I stood at a crossroads in my life, wondering, where do I go from here? In the days following the trial, I lived like a shadow. I avoided mirrors, afraid to see a weakened, betrayed Benjamin staring back. The company continued to operate, but I no longer found excitement in numbers or contracts. I once thought money and status were everything, but now they felt like hollow trappings. I needed a new purpose, a reason to get up each morning. One evening, sitting in my office, I stumbled upon an old notebook. Inside were scribbled lines from my younger days when I dreamed of building a better world. I remembered the boy Benjamin, who believed success wasn't just about making money but about creating value for others. That thought was like a faint spark, small but enough to pull me out of the darkness. I began to act. I founded a charity called Restore, dedicated to those who, like me, had been betrayed or harmed by loved ones. I wanted them to know they weren't alone, that pain didn't have to be the end. The foundation started small, with programs offering psychological and financial support to victims of abuse or deception by family members. I hired a team of experts, psychologists, lawyers, to help them heal from their trauma and rebuild their lives. The work wasn't easy. Each story I heard from those who came to the foundation cut like a knife, stirring memories of Emily and Daniel. There was Sarah, a woman who shared how her husband plotted to seize her assets after pretending to love her for a decade. There was Michael, a young man whose own brother swindled him, leaving him drowning in debt. I listened, shared, and tried to offer them hope, even as I sometimes grappled with my own pain. Gradually, Restore grew. We expanded our programs from legal aid to vocational training, helping those who had been betrayed regain confidence and independence. I began receiving thank you letters, stories of people who had bounced back, found new jobs, or even rebuilt families. Each letter was a brick, helping me reconstruct my faith in humanity and in myself. My company transformed as well. I introduced new policies focused on employee welfare and community contributions. I didn't want to be just a businessman chasing profits. I wanted to be someone who made a difference. Meetings no longer revolved solely around revenue, but also about how we could support social projects from education to healthcare. My employees, initially surprised, soon embraced the changes enthusiastically. They said they were proud to work for a company with a soul. I also started sharing my story, not to boast about my victory, but to inspire others. I was invited to speak at conferences and television programs. I spoke of the dark days, how I nearly lost everything, and how I found myself again. I told people that the sweetest revenge isn't hatred, but standing up, living better, and turning pain into strength. Each time I looked at the audience and saw their eyes light up, I knew I was on the right path. Still, not every day was easy. Some nights I lay awake thinking of Emily and Daniel, wondering if I could have done something to prevent things from reaching this point. But then I reminded myself, I didn't start their crime. I was merely the survivor. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future. A year after the trial, Restore held its first event, a gala fundraiser attended by hundreds. I stood on the stage looking down at unfamiliar yet hopeful faces. Sarah, the woman who had lost everything, was now a counselor for the foundation, beaming with a radiant smile. Michael, the young man betrayed by his brother, had opened a small bakery and brought homemade cupcakes to the event. I held the microphone, my voice slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the swell of emotion. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "I once thought my life was over when I was betrayed. But today, standing here, I realize we can overcome anything as long as we don't give up. The sweetest revenge isn't hatred. It's living a successful, meaningful life that those who hurt us can never have." The applause roared like a wave, washing away the last traces of doubt within me. I stepped off the stage, mingling with the crowd, feeling the warmth of hugs and words of gratitude. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Not to hide, but because I knew I had found myself again. I haven't forgotten Emily and Daniel, but they no longer haunt me. They chose their path and I chose mine. I will keep living, keep building, and keep bringing hope to those who need it. This life, though filled with pain, is still worth fighting for.